further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Roger Turpen, possibly the most famous of the Indiana YouTubers and definitely one of the most prolific. We got to know Roger a long time ago now. I don't know when that was. We actually were in a video. I guess I could have looked that up. And it's just wonderful to see his channel thrive and that everywhere he goes and talks, people recognize his voice. So, Roger, please, come on up.
There we are. The first thing I do before I get started is I want to thank you again for inviting me. I didn't know that this many people would come, and I didn't know that many people would like my channel. I started off with an idea that we're going to do this for 3 months. We had some people at my work said, I have no idea where to take my family, and I said, well, I can give you a list. I figured out it was just easier to make videos. Picture is like a million words. This is what we did, and this is what became of it. So without further delay, I'm not from Lawrence County, but my family is. Actually, my family came in 1856, lived in this very cabin, 6 generations in Indiana now. I was not born here. My dad and his family lived at Bartlettsville. Sam Bartlett was actually my great-great-great-great-grandfather. He started the town itself. But I didn't live here. All I knew was my family always went to the Bartlettsville Christian Church at Bartlettsville. And my grandparents, they lived in a little small house around the corner, and they had a little restaurant and a grocery. And my only way I knew Lawrence County was they would come down and take us on the weekend, or they'd take us on road trips. And I absolutely love the road trips. And it's gotten into my blood, and it's been there ever since. When my dad passed away, buried up there at Bartlettsville, we kind of stopped that because we didn't have the money to do it. But my mother, I put this video up this for a reason. People say, why do you have such a young picture on YouTube? I said, well, my mother took this picture and it brings back a memory. And that memory is this. I graduated from college, couldn't get a job, and she said, you know what, you're in a rut. You need to go on a road trip. I said, where are we gonna go? She says, well, let's go to Springville State Park. I think you'll really like it. So what's that? So we went to it, and I was absolutely enthralled with this, thought this was the best place ever. Man, this place has got caves, all these old things. I love this, let's do this all of the time. So that's what we did. For many years after that, Mom and I went all over the state, different states, and we just had so many great memories of that. And we did that until I got married. And after she died, we didn't do a lot of travel. We immediately had kids. I lived in Louisville, and that's where we started making, people said, where should I take my young family? It doesn't cost much money, we don't have much money. So I started making the videos, and that's really where it took off. So, about a little over 3.5 years ago, although I was making these YouTube videos when I could, I got downsized. And I said, you know what? This is a perfect opportunity to go full-time with this. And in your 50s and saying I'm going to start my whole life over sounds like a crazy idea, and it really was a crazy idea. But I did it anyway, and that's why I'm talking to you today, because I've been able to touch a few people, and I'm very proud of that. I feel very humbled to be here and talk to you about what I've done with this channel. People ask me, what's the best thing about all this that you've done over the last 8 years? I said, well, the places were very cool, but also the people that I met were just entertaining, exciting, unusual, and it's made a big difference in my life. It shows, some people have watched my channel may recognize this one. This is one of my bigger videos. It was called Dark Silver, and all it was, my great-grandmother had a story about a silver mine in southern Indiana. And I wanted to tell this because I thought to myself, if I don't do this, this story will be forgotten, nobody will remember it, it'll just be dead with me. So I said, I'm gonna make a story out of this. This little story that was supposed to be 20 minutes in duration took me all the way to Kentucky, all the way through Indiana, and ended up at Shoals. And when I went to Shoals, I met a guy named Charlie. Charlie had a cave in his front yard. And that, I thought, how many people have a cave in their front yard? So I started talking to Charlie, and I said, hey, that's pretty neat, you got a cave there. I said, what's that about? He says, well, I got spring water, and we have lines to all of my neighbors and stuff. And I said, you lived here a long time? He said, oh, yeah, 70-some years. And I said, you heard any Indian stories? He says, I know a few. He went, he got some artifacts, and he showed me these things. And I said, wow, because I'm a kid from Greenwood where nothing like this happens. So he goes, he shows me, this is a scraping stone, or this is an arrowhead, or this is a device that they made the holes in the buckskin. And a kid from Greenwood, I am just out of my mind. This is just great stuff. So he says, do you want them? I got plenty in the house. He just gives them to me. So I am going crazy about this. He says, I find them in my garden every time it rains. I got plenty of them. Have you heard about the Indian cave on the hill? What? And so the next thing I know, he's taking me up the road, and there's a cave. He says, as far as I know, this is where the Indians hid up here. And so, again, kid from Indiana, middle-class kid, don't go anywhere, flat, Greenwood, Indiana. This is about the most exciting thing that's ever happened to me. And I've been back about 3 times. It's got a lot of legends. This place over here is too small for a fat guy like me. But if you go inside of it, somebody has scratched a big pistol on the wall, and local legend says that that's where John Dillinger hid, and that's where he scratched it in the wall. All I know is I went back about 100 and some feet. They got smaller and smaller, muddier and muddier, and I didn't want to go any further. There was no treasure, no silver that I could find, but just a really interesting place, and I'm glad that I did it. I came back several times to talk to Charlie again and didn't find Charlie. I drove down the road and there's somebody in a cart, and I said, say, that guy lives down there at Charlie. I said, what's going on with him? They said, well, he's got cancer, he's not doing too good. And I didn't hear anything about it. Tried to come back several more times, he was never there. So I finally looked it up online, he'd passed away. And all I could think was, if I hadn't taken that one road trip, that one time, I would have never met him, never heard the stories, and never been able to find that cave. So sometimes it's that one little foot out the door that puts you in a better place you didn't expect. So here we are, it's COVID. I'm doing these videos, and you can't go to museums anymore. So all the other YouTubers doing museums and things like that, they can't do that. So I said, I'm going to Cave River Valley. And if you've ever been there, it's probably one of the most desolate places you can find. There's not much there. Long road, and I'm talking to people before I go there. They say, oh yeah, it's got these great Indian caves. Oh, you got to see them. It's got this one that's over a mile long, goes back in the dark, and it's got a place where you can float in it. It's awesome. Oh, and Bigfoot lives there. What do you mean Bigfoot lives there? They said, oh yes, I knew somebody. They always know somebody, you know. I knew somebody, they parked their van there and they were sleeping there, and on the middle of the night, this hairy arm reaches in and gets a banana off the dash. So I'm walking this long trail in the middle of nowhere thinking about the banana taken from a dash with a hairy arm, right? I get there, and it is absolutely beautiful. It's got a long waterfall, and this cave in the very top, which is very interesting. They used to charge 25 cents, and you could go through this cave in an inner tube. And that was a big thing back in the day. And they even, in some places inside this cave, there's still light fixtures where they have lights on the inside of it. So a pretty neat little place. Caving people still do it today, but they don't have the electricity, but they do float back in the cave. Also during the pandemic, went to New Amsterdam. And I was there talking to some people. Well, actually, I wasn't talking to nobody at first. All I had was a tripod along the road, and this lady says, what you doing? So I'm taking video for my YouTube channel. You live here? Oh yeah, I've been living here all my life. She said, come to town and I'll tell you some stories. And that just makes my day. She says, well, this place here belonged to my family. It's been here probably 4 generations. And in the upstairs, they had the Independent Order of Odd Fellows. And they were an odd group, of course. So they would, if somebody in the community wasn't doing right towards their family, they would go visit them. So we kept order in our town for those people. And they said we had this forever as a little store. We had a little town square. But in 1937, there was this big flood along the Ohio River. And everything but this store was washed down the Ohio River, completely away. So she said, but there's something interesting. She said, across the river is a beautiful old house. And it belongs to my friend's grandparents. And I said, they never had any money. How did they get such a nice house? They said, well, during 1937, they saw this beautiful mansion of a house floating down the Ohio River. They went out with a boat, put a chain on it, and they had a house ever since. You never know what you're going to find when you talk to people on the road. Also went out to Twin Swamps. Twin Swamps is on all the west side of the entire state of Indiana. It's in Mount Vernon. And it absolutely looks like the Florida Everglades. It's got bald cypress. And so I go out there. I knew going in it was going to be muddy, probably buggy. I sprayed myself down, got my boots on. It was more muddy than I thought it would be. It does have some boardwalks, but I get back there, and there's a wonderful little place to sit up there. So I'm sitting up there, enjoying this outdoors. Well, I hate that I can't see anybody because of COVID, but this sure is peaceful. And all of a sudden I heard in the distance, hey, mister. Hey, mister. And I'm thinking, having somebody say, hey, mister, back in the woods is probably the last thing I wanted. I've seen movies. And then out of the brush came these two people. And they were visiting from Evansville. And they said, we saw you taking pictures with your camera. Could you take ours? Because we like a picture from you. We'll pay you even. I say, you don't owe me nothing. I'll send you one. We sat there and we talked for probably an hour or so. Just the most wonderful people. And we'd been cooped up in our houses so long that this was just a wonderful exchange. And one of my most favorite memories of the road. I have had a lot of those situations, fortunately. I was at the Monastery Immaculate Conception over here at Ferdinand, taking a picture of the front of this place, and all of a sudden this little tiny car with this little tiny woman stops by, and she says, would you like to see inside? And I said, well, yeah, sure. She says, I'm a nun. Oh, okay, you don't dress like a nun. Well, we don't have to dress like that no more. All right. So she took me inside, and I'm not Catholic. She handed me a hymnal, and I did know one song, and we sang songs together. And after this, she took me through the entire place until after dark. Just a wonderful tour, and she says, I've been here since I was a little girl. I was an orphan, and me and this other girl, we went to the very top of that. We're not supposed to, but we went up there. And she just delighted in telling me her stories, and I said, this is what this is all about. It's more than just the places. It's the people that you meet along the road. And even to this day, I think back to her, I forgot what her name is, but I remember who she was to me at that moment. As you travel the state, you find a lot of historians, and those are probably some of the most interesting people to talk to, but they have the same problem, getting that story out to other people. I called up the Du Bois County Museum, and you may not know by the size of this is the largest county museum in Indiana. You only see a part of it. The rest of it is below ground, like a football field. And I said, I want to do a thing about the museum. Don't know much about it. And they said, we're going to put you with Ernie. I said, who's Ernie? He said, he's in his 80s, and he knows everything about county history. He'll be great for you. I said, all right. So I get there, and Ernie is not only in his 80s, but he's got a walker. So Ernie walks through the whole thing with me, very diligent, and he tells you about the story and all the displays. He absolutely was a treasure trove. It's so big that they have a 2-story cabin in the basement. It is that huge. And he said, well, let me give you something. He says, I've been studying up on Ida Hagen. She is one of my heroes. She was the first female black pharmacist and postmaster. And he says, I want you to have this book. And the thing that I get from the experience was people that love Indiana history, they're very giving. They want everybody to know. And I've had several people just give me things, just out of the kindness of their heart. But the big thing that I learned from the experience was, he said, I know I'm not longer for this earth. I know when I die, these stories will be gone when I am. It got to make me think that maybe my little videos weren't just about travel, maybe there was something a little bit bigger. I think they're about telling stories that need to be retold. And that was kind of the same thing at Linville. I met a guy there too. He worked in the coal mines his entire adult life. And he was the only one at the museum. And so we sat around and we just talked about his life, about the coal mines and how things were back in the day. And it just stressed upon me that these stories need to be told by someone. If it's not going to be me, who's it going to be? And so here he was probably 85 at the time I was talking to him, and he says, I got big plans for this place, and I hope that there's people that believe in this story long enough to make this story go on for him. Now it's kind of the same story at Division Street School as well. I'm a person that looks on the internet for interesting places. I found this museum I didn't know existed. It's called Division Street School. And I got there, and there's a lady saw me drive around, says, hey, you want to see inside? Well, same thing. Yeah, sure I would. So I went in, and she says, yeah, says, I was a student here, and now I'm a teacher. I went to college, became a teacher, and I teach for New Albany schools, and I do this volunteer. I'm here every weekend. So how many people do you get? She says, almost no one. But she says, sometimes they have the New Albany kids come in school buses, and I take them out, we play baseball together, and I show them what it was like when I was a little girl. Just knowing a person that had lived the history, seen history, and wanted to convey that history makes me think, maybe I'm on the right track to doing these videos. So I came to Lawrence County Museum. Let me tell you about these great people here. Hey, it's all right, come on, it's all right. I came down here, of course, like I said, my family came to Lawrence County all the time, and I heard this thing I saw this thing on the road said, Dr. Foote's grave, what's this? And so I hiked back and I saw this thing, and wow, that looks like something out of Egypt. I kind of like that, but I have no idea who the guy is. So I went to the museum and I talked to them, and they said, talk to Joyce, she knows stuff. And so Joyce goes and starts talking to me. I've got this small history. However, there's another guy that's been working on this for over 20 years. I said, well, who's that? He said, yeah, this guy named Roger Turpen. Well, my last name's Turpen too. Come to find out we were related down the line. We got to talking and we made this incredible timeline of things that happened in this man's life. He came from the East Coast, his brother came from the East Coast. His brother died in Gibson County. When he came to Indiana, he wanted his brother's bones. So he went on an expedition, got the bones, took them back to what was Old Palestine, buried them there, and then when this was built later on, he had those bones transferred again. Now him and his brother are inside this grave. And you can't see it very well at this picture, but the below part is a solid piece of limestone that was dug out over a year. And that's where he's placed inside. So really interesting story. What the problem came is this. I'm telling a story about a hero. Dr. Foote was not only a physician, he was a lawyer also, very smart man. He would know about somebody who was sick across the river. He would swim the river to help them. Just an amazing man, but not so much in his old age. He had a son that committed suicide. He kind of lost it. He started drinking a lot. He left his wife for a younger woman. So I said, what am I going to do with this story? I don't want to offend anybody because this is the hero of the county. And I said, Joyce, what do I do? And she said, just tell the story. They will get it. And that's what I did, and people did get it. And when I think about all that we went through to do that, I think it was a story worth telling. We did 3 videos about it, and I think it's a story that's worth retelling. And there's a little bit better detail. That bottom part is a solid piece of limestone. And there's some trivia about this. You might not know about this grave. At the time, they thought that his horse was buried there too, because he had a favorite horse. But they said his horse actually carried the caisson with him in it, and later there's speculation that he was buried on the hill beside him, but there is no horse buried inside the grave with Dr. Foote and his brother. So here I am, and I'm a YouTuber. I get lots of people sending me comments. Sometimes they're okay, sometimes they're not so okay, and then sometimes there's people that change your life. And one day I met a guy from Crawford County, Indiana, a self-described river rat, and I said, well, tell me about your life. And as he told me about his life, I figured out this country boy is going to make me a country boy again. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. I grew up in Greenwood, Indiana, suburb of Indianapolis, and I did talk with a southern accent as a little kid. You go to the big schools, and they don't talk like this, so I lose the accent. Well, I come back down to Louisville, I gain a little bit of it, and then I start talking to him, and 10 minutes later, I am Southern Indiana Roger all over again. And not only that, I don't think people would understand what we were talking about because we were talking so fast. So I said, tell me about down here in your life and along the river. He says, I gotta tell you, Raj, I find so many artifacts down here. I said, you do? He says, yeah. I said, man, I wanted to do that all my life. I said, what do you do? He says, I'll tell you, Raj, I just feel it. I just feel it. I said, you feel it? I said, I go out there and I feel that I'm gonna find an arrowhead, and then I find it. And there it is right in front of me. I said, well, that's a pretty neat story. I said, well, all I know is I go to different places. Some were unusual, spooky. He goes, oh man, I do that all the time. I said, really? He said, yes. I went to this one graveyard and it got all quiet. I start hearing all these spooky noises. I said, what'd you do? He says, well, I just sang a song. Well, what did you sing? He says, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. He's a hoot. And glad to meet him. He's been sort of like a brother to me. It's funny that I would have never known him if I hadn't started this YouTube channel. I met a lot of good people. I want to highlight a really good friend of mine named Wendy. One day, like I said, I get these notes, and somebody said, hey, I want to show you a castle in the woods. Castle in the woods, really? He says, yep. And this meter in the back of my head says, this is probably not right or legit. It's not going to end well if I go there, who knows? But they sent me a picture. It does look like a castle. So I went out, met Wendy, she was legit, and this is what I found. In the 1800s, this guy had built this castle-like structure. In the basement of it, he was even genius enough to route a spring to go through the bottom of it. He put his glass of milk bottles and they would stay cool. Very ingenious for his time. And then on the second floor, he had a chute where you could put all the used up milk. It'd go downhill to the pigs, and the pigs would have milk. Pretty ingenious, probably pretty stinky. That's the outside of it, by the way. What had happened was the last owner of the house was smoking. They fell asleep, and they burnt in the house. That's why it's in ruins. And this federal side of the house was so intact that when I visited it, if you look up there on the left, her clothes are still in the closet. And had been there for about 20 years. Pretty amazing. I'll tell you approximately, I can't tell you where, and I'll tell you why in a moment. It's around the Galena area. This barn was pretty spectacular. Limestone bottom, limestone window shelves, beautiful. I actually met the lady who lived in it last, when it was intact. She said what destroyed it was that they had a winter where they had all this snow accumulate, and it crushed the ceiling and just destroyed the whole thing. But she said, I lived there for many years. That's her on the right, that's Wendy on the left. And they were a hoot because they're both country girls, and they're just going through place by place and talking about it a mile a minute. And I learned a lot from the experience, but the biggest thing is, there's a thing called trespassing. And the place was called Jersey Park, which I thought, It's a park, everybody's allowed, you know. But it was owned by a guy, and it was definitely private property. I put out 3 videos, took me probably 5 months to do it. I got a letter from an attorney. This is my client's property. We would like you to take those videos down. And I thought, why? And they said, it's causing a nuisance. The road in front of the castle, I didn't say where it was, but everybody knew somebody that did. Let's go take a carload of people and visit the old castle. And so they were creating a nuisance. So I learned a big lesson. If you see a no trespassing sign or a place like Ruins in the Woods, think twice. But what I didn't meet was Wendy from the whole thing. But she told me a little story about herself after she got to know me a little better. She said, Roger, I'm an empath. What's that mean? Well, I sense things. What's that mean? She says, I sense spirits. Oh, brother, I thought I had a good friend there for a while. I sense spirits and I sense history. So, all right, well, instead of writing her off, I said, all right, I'll take you somewhere, you tell me what you sense. So I took her to the Electra Memorial down here at Candleton, Indiana. Looks pretty benign, right? First time I went there, I had my tripod up, and these 2 little boys walked up to me and said, hey, mister, what you doing there? And I said, well, taking a video for my YouTube channel. He goes, oh, mister, this place is haunted, real bad. I said, all right, this is a perfect place to bring Wendy and get her sense about this. So we're going up the hill. I said, I'm not going to tell you what this place is. You tell me what you feel. And we're going up there. She says, I am starting to get really nauseous. So are you okay? She says, no, go ahead. Oh, man, I'm getting faint. I just feel like everything is spinning. Are you okay? You want me to turn around? No, keep going. Get to the top of the hill. She says, I gotta go. Gets out of the car, runs across the street, throws up immediately. He comes back and says, what is this place? It's crazy. It's like it's spinning. I said, Wendy, this is where they had this plane lose 2 engines and went straight into the ground. Killed everybody on board. She says, I felt that. And I said, is there any way she could have guessed this? I'm not real sure, but that's kind of spooky, kind of odd. So I'm going to test you again. Took her to Vincennes. A lot of people know about Vincennes, many don't. That's where George Rogers Clark, the hero of the Northwest, he captured Fort Sackville from the British. Well, I know some deeper history than probably a lot of people do. And I said, Wendy, I'm going to take you out here. Again, you tell me how you feel. And this place, we were over here by the graveyard. This has got about several thousand graves there. Not many of them are marked because it's been too many years. A lot of them have eroded and fallen apart. But she got around here by where the fort is. She says, I feel like 2 people were killed here violently. I said, well, here's the story. George Rogers Clark comes in as a surprise attack. He's all over the woods, and he captures 2 Indians for their spies for the British. Instead of firing a shot, he yelled at the commander, if you don't open the door and surrender, this is what's going to happen to you. And he killed both of them with tomahawks right in front of them. So the guy said, I give, and they'll give up. There's no way she could have known that. So I'm pretty convinced at this point. So I say, all right, one last try. This one's a little more personal. I said, one time I drove up to Dana, Indiana with my mom, and there's a rest stop I just felt weird about. I said, I won't tell you more because I don't know more, but you tell me what your impression is. So I took her up there. She gets out and she says, this just feels wrong, like somebody died here, something terrible, and my ears are ringing like crazy. I didn't tell her that, but my ears were ringing like crazy too. She says, we shouldn't stay here. I said, you're on, we're out of here. So there's things in this world we don't understand, and I'm glad I didn't write her off. She's a very good friend. When I thought I was having a heart attack, she was the person that took me to the hospital and saved my life. So I made a good friend and have ever since. But strangely enough, I don't like spooky places. People say, oh, you need to do some spooky places. And no, Roger shouldn't do spooky places. But what you find is people go places that are historical. They usually have a haunted history to them. And I don't look for it, it finds me every single time. Such as the Culbertson Mansion. Been here 4 times. It's down in New Albany. And I told the caretaker, I said, well, I gotta tell you, I've been here 4 times, getting close to my 60s, probably never gonna be back, probably my last tour. He says, I'll tell you what, we'll take our time, no time limit. Do you want the historical tour or the haunted tour? I said, it comes back again, I don't try. He said, well, the biggest thing that we have a logbook. There's so many things that happen here that we write in the logbook, and it's getting pretty thick. People see things, hear things. The biggest thing is, whatever is here loves vacuum cleaners. It turns them off and on all the time. We don't know why. So I go to Lanier Mansion down there at Madison. Beautiful, beautiful place. Has a wonderful staircase. If you're afraid of heights, probably not the thing for you, because it's a pretty nasty staircase going out there. Fortunately, nothing happened to me, but the story is that they had some tourists that were there when they had a tour your own thing back in the day. They went to the top, and they came down laughing. Just having a great time. And the lady says, I'm glad you had a great time. Says, you know, how was it? They said, oh, the lady upstairs in that red fancy dress, she told me all about this place, and it was just wonderful. She knew everything. He says, we don't have an employee up there. Ran upstairs, and there was nobody there. And that's the upstairs, a little spooky. So I went out to Hill Forest. This is over at Aurora. Beautiful mansion. The guy made his fortune in whiskey and had riverboats that went up and down the Ohio River. So the front of the thing looks like a riverboat. Pretty cool. So I'm up there on the second floor. I told them what I was doing. I said, I'm making a YouTube video. Just want to get all the different rooms of the house. They said, well, fine, go ahead. So I was sitting up there by myself, didn't notice anything different. But when I went home to edit the thing, I heard tapping of a foot, as if they were waiting for me to leave. And I didn't hear it when I was there. What was very cool, you might notice this. This is over at Vivi. This is the Schenck Mansion. Beautiful, beautiful mansion of a house. I got to go there when it was a bed and breakfast. And the lady, I told her what I wanted to do, and she said, we would love for you to come. We can't get people to stay here. It's out in the middle of the country. We don't get any guests in the winter. We're really struggling. Any kind of advertisement would be great. So I came out there, and everything was very cool. Went to the second floor, and she said, this is the room with the most activity. What do you mean by most activity? She said, well, when we have guests that are staying here that are men, they say that it feels like a female kisses them on their cheek at night. Okay. And about that time, somebody yelled from downstairs, hey, you got a call. So they leave me right there in the room with the most activity. So I put my tripod on the rack, I'm taking pictures, and it goes in and out of focus, in and out of focus, in and out of focus, as if it's trying to focus on something that was not there. And it didn't do it anywhere else, and it never has since. So I have no idea. So I said, oh, the anecdote to this one. I'm talking to her, she comes back upstairs, I'm talking to her, and she says, I'm so excited. I said, what for? She says, my niece just had her baby over at Madison, I'm gonna go visit her. And I said, okay, I'll finish up. She said, oh, you can stay here? I said, well, who's gonna be here? Oh, just you can leave when you want to. No, ma'am, I'm leaving with you. So I'll go across town. This is over by the river. This is the Hoosier Theater. Also a very old place, lots of history there. And I don't ask for these stories, they just come to me. So I'm talking to the lady, she says, I said, yeah, I was over at the Schenck Mansion. Oh yeah, that's haunted. I said, yeah, I've heard. And she says, yeah, sometimes I've looked over there and I've seen people in like 1800s era dress in the yard and they just disappear. It's really weird. I said, great, just get on with the story. I'm trying to finish this. She says, oh yeah, and he said, when you look at your footage, you might see something. We have something here too. I said, what's up with you people at Vivi? She said a news crew had actually went through there and they had took video and they saw something in these seats, but fortunately I wasn't one of them. So people said, oh man, you gotta come to Mitchell, you gotta go to Whispers Estate. I said, no, I really don't. No interest whatsoever. But I did do the Tunnelton Tunnel. more interested in the history, and I was going to talk about the legend. If you lived around here, you probably know the story, but the story is this. In the time before they had, so I can advance here, before they had this line with bricks, it was all rock. And when the train would go through there, it would create a horrendous rush. It'd shake the place, it would create a vacuum, and rocks would fall onto the railroad tracks there. So what this meant was that they needed a watchman to go down there and take those off after each time the train would go through. And so, as the story goes, there was a night watchman that was murdered inside of the cave, well, this tunnel. They never really knew who did it. They had some suspicions. But after that, there were weird things happening. And I knew about these things. I didn't go all through that tunnel, but I went enough to take some pictures. So while here I was ready to pack up for the day, and there's a guy that went with me, and all of a sudden he says, "What is that?" And I said, "What?" I look in the tunnel, and I see a floating green lantern, like in the legend. And I said, "I think we're seeing the legend." So I quickly put the camera back on the tripod, I took the pictures, and I didn't see anybody holding it. I didn't see any lines. It was just there. I don't know if it's some weird phenomenon or what, but I saw that lantern. I have the good thing about having a YouTube channel is you get to see different places, keep it interesting, keep it fresh. I went to Kentucky and saw where they actually had a prehistoric site that they covered with a big building. I went to Ohio, where I saw lots of their earthworks over there, fascinating. Went to Missouri, climbed Cahokia, it's a tall one. I thought I was a big time explorer. Lots of stairs, got to the top, and then there was a girl that climbed it 3 times doing her jogging. So not much of an explorer, I guess. But Indiana's got a lot of cool stuff too. We have, of course, we have the mounds up there at Mount State Park in Anderson. We have Angel Mounds down here, but they have categoried over 2,000 different mounds in Indiana, so there's a lot still here. Right down in this area, you might know this, you may know not. This is the Wesley Chapel Gulf. And what it is, you've heard of the Lost River, flows through about 23 miles of caverns, and it comes to this big place the size of like a football field. This is where a cave has collapsed. And I've been when it was drowned like this, and it was up like that. And when I was there, it was probably the spookiest place I'd ever been, because it makes a sucking sound as the water goes through. And you're thinking to yourself, if I fall in, nobody will ever know where I went. And this is another mysterious place. This is not very far away. This is the Orangeville Rise. And what this goes down into that same cave system. And some diver guys that I know had went down 10 stories deep. And they said, you get down there, he said, it disappears into darkness. But everything in front of you with your flashlight, you can't see a thing. There's so much silt. So nobody has ever really gone down there. The speculation is this could be as big or bigger than Mammoth Cave, which is now I think it's like 400 miles long now. They don't know where it goes. And as you know, there's lots of different good caves in Indiana. If you're not covering these with your channel, you're not an Indiana channel, because this is southern Indiana. I was fortunate to go down to Blue Spring Caverns. Also figured out that caving guys have a different sense of humor than the rest of us. So we're down there, we're going through this nice little tour, really peaceful, just me and the guide, nobody else on the boat. And he shuts the motor off, we're just gliding, we see blind cavefish and crawfish. It's a wonderful, nice little experience. Then we're heading back, and then he says, you know, this cave's haunted. I said, what is up with you people? He says, yeah, sometimes we're down here by ourselves, we hear screams. You hear screams? Yeah, screams. And they just get louder and scarier, and we don't talk about it a lot, but it's intense. So, all right, so whatever. Going there, all of a sudden I start hearing a scream, high-pitched squeal. I'm looking at him, he's looking at me. It's louder and louder and louder. And then we see another boat coming, and he says, that's got a bad bearing on that boat. He got me. But through that experience, I met a lot of good caving guys, and we started sharing where I had been, where they had been. And I said, well, I'm not so interested in being a caver myself. I'm interested in the caves and the history about them. And so I went to Shoals. I went to lots of different caves there. And the big thing that I share with everybody is I've tried to share as many neat places with my viewers as I can, but not everybody is a good person. They will go to places, they will do graffiti. This is one of the coolest places along the White River. This is House Rock at Shoals. People went there and they've graffitied all over the place. So there's places I just don't tell where it is. Like this place at Paoli, a caver guy said, hey man, I got a place for you. And it's like a temple. You go down through this shaft, go through it, and then you got this opening. It's just like something out of a movie. And this here is in the middle of the Hoosier National Forest. It's the biggest natural arch in Indiana. You don't hear about arches like you do in Kentucky, but just an amazing, amazing place. And at the bottom, there's a cave, and that's where they found a couple of bodies. They think they're Native American, they're not really sure. And when I got done with it, I just sat there. Lots of these places, I'm so busy because I want to make a lot of things happen in a day, but I just sat there, and it was like a temple. And after that experience, it's like, I will share it with the right kind of people, but not everybody. And one of my hiking buddies, he said, I want to go to this place. And I trusted him, and what he did, he took a bag with him. And every piece of trash, everything that he didn't think belonged there, he picked it up. That's the kind of buddies that you want. Had one fella, Stephen Solomon, if you've never met him, he's a fantastic historian. We were talking about story ideas, and he says, I got something for you. He said, let me take you to where they have a very old petroglyph. And so we got on a boat, we went down upstream, I guess it was, and we found these, and he said, these are over 1,000 years old, they've always been here. But because of the level of the Ohio River being raised by the lock and dam system, these are being covered and splashed. He said, probably in 100 years, these may not even be here. So as I look at those, I'm very fortunate to have found something like this. And my last adventure, if you've watched it, I found this cave. It's tied to many legends. First, the silver mine legend, and it's also tied to the Reno gang. And I was talking to some of these caving guys, these friends of mine, and I said, well, I kind of know where it is. Have you heard of it? They said, we've not only heard of this cave, we're going there on Friday. Do you want to go? And I said, yeah. So what they didn't tell me was it required a half hour of walking through water up to your knees, and all that's really slippery, as you know, if you ever walked through a creek. But just a bunch of great guys, and they showed me the cave, and not only that, it had a bunch of carvings, probably 150 years old in front of it, which I thought were just outstanding. And if I hadn't made these videos, I wouldn't have met these people, and they wouldn't have shown me these. Just a beautiful, beautiful opening. And yes, somebody said, it's haunted. So as we go through, I've done over 230 plus videos now, most of them about Indiana, got some more to do. And I guess people ask me, when's the end of this? Well, I don't really know. Every time I get done with a story, I think it's the last one. And then somebody will say, hey, I got a story for you. How about this? And sometimes it turned into something great, sometimes not so great. But hopefully over the years, I have been the guy that's made somebody think, yep, it's time for a road trip. Thank you.
Roger, would you be willing to take a few?
Absolutely. Sorry.
This is just a thank you. I believe it was a couple years ago. You did a video on Francis Slocum,
Yes.
alias Conocoa.
Yes.
My grandmother's mother was a Slocum. Francis Slocum would have been my great aunt. And I want to thank you for spreading that. But the family lore is she was kidnapped,
Yes.
not adopted. Some articles say she about it. But when we tell the story, we like to dramatize it. You know, she was kidnapped. Thank you for including that in your story.
Well, it kind of hit home for me. In my family history, I had like I said, it would be a great-great-great-great-grandmother, one of the first pioneer Turpens in Indiana, her and Moses Turpen. That's the cabin you saw in the early part of the presentation. She was a young girl down at Paint Lake, Kentucky, and the Shawnees came in and they shot her dad, killed him, maimed the mother, killed another man that was trying to defend the cabin. And the one young boy, they kept yelling at him, get the gun, and he had a little blunderbuss, and he pulled it so hard, it was not locked correctly. He pulled it so hard, he actually broke one of the triggers before he shot the Indian and killed the Indian. Then, after that, she was kidnapped and taken all the way up to Fort Detroit. Well, her brother said, I know where they probably took her. So he jumps on a horse, he goes all the way up to Detroit, to Fort Detroit, finds his sister, who had already been married off to somebody, captures her, brings her back home, and then she marries my great-great-great-grandfather, who's to Lawrence County. So I did identify. Anybody else?
What happened to the man in the tomb, Brian Turpen, the book? Did that ever come out?
No. Let me tell you a little story about Brian. Brian is probably one of the most wonderful researchers I've ever met in my life. He's extremely thorough. We have a lot of the same good blood there talking about, let's get this right. And he keeps finding more things, talking to family members, bringing things. And when I made my last video in the series, I said, Brian, let me put a picture of your book so people will know where to go, because this is just great information. He says, sure. Gives me the cover of the book. I put it at the end, and that's been, 2 years now? He's still not done with it. But I'll probably be one of the first people to buy one.
What kind of camera do you guys do?
Oh, great question. I started out when I wanted to make videos. I said I want to do a great production. Don't have a lot of money, so I went and I found a Canon XA10 camera, and I used that for many years. When I went to Blue Spring Caverns, I was shocked because even with a light, I couldn't see anything. So what am I going to do? I've made this appointment with this guy to do this video. All I had left was my iPhone. So I took my iPhone out, put it on the thing. It worked beautifully in the dark. And so it's like, I've been carrying this big old camera around all this time. Well, a little camera does just as good. So ever since then, I've been using my iPhone. Anybody else? Favorite what?
Favorite tap water taste in Indiana.
Well, it's funny you should mention that. It's like whenever I would come down to Bartlettsville, Indiana, my grandma and grandpa had well water, and you definitely knew what that taste was. And when I would go to like restaurants, they would use tap water mixed in with the syrup, and that definitely tasted different too to me. But I now they do it all differently now with filtration, but I couldn't tell you my favorite.
Is there one story that just stays with you that you just haven't been able to shake? Obviously, there's a lot of haunting ones that resonate with you on different levels. Is there one particular one that really seems like you just inside you?
I'm always enthralled with my grandmother's silver mine story. A part of me says the Indians were using a very clever shell game. They would take this silver to one cave, then they'd tell a pioneer, come see our silver. Then they'd show them all these piles of silver, and the pioneer would say, oh my goodness, this is wonderful. I want to go and find that cave. And they spent the rest of their life looking for this cave. And then you see the story is, they moved the silver to another cave and another cave. And so it's like, I think that what happened was that they just moved it, and then it disappeared when they all went out west. There were some Indians that came out late 1800s, got off a boxcar at Shoals, and they went in the woods, and they came back. They had a big blanket carrying something that was covered, and then no Indians ever came back. So maybe they took the rest of their silver. But a little bitty piece of me says, man, it might still be out there. I don't know. And even to this day, I'll have people say, I've got a clue for you. And I said, oh, not again, because you never know, who you're dealing with. The guy says, yeah, well, I got a place you need to go. I said, show me pictures. They can never show me pictures. But one day, a lady at Shoals says, I got something for you. I bet you do. She says, my brother needs to talk to you. I said, all right. I'm probably just doing this for no reason. So I make the call. He says, here's my story. Me and my daughter were bow hunting. And we were across the river at Shoals there, White River, and we found this cave, and it had a carving of a snake at the entrance. I said, oh, really? He says, it's down there by Old Man's Nose on the river. It's unmistakable. I said, well, that does sound pretty interesting. He says, but it's on private property, and that guy don't like visitors. So who knows? Maybe he's got a treasure cave and doesn't know it. Never know.
Roger, I want you to stay here one more minute. If anybody else has a question to ask, go ahead and ask.
So I'm interested, I've watched several of your videos and you hint at a conspiracy with the Smithsonian. I'd like to hear some input on that.
Sure, absolutely. I've seen many sides of it. Just to refresh everybody who has not seen the videos I've made, I started a series on the artifacts in Indiana. When I started going to the museums looking for the mound builder artifacts that were available, there were quite a few of them, and quite remarkable ones. Over time, they started disappearing, and I kind of thought that was unusual. So I made a multi-year search of all these museums that said they had mound builder artifacts. And those museums are being shut down or gone or whatever. And some people said, well, that Smithsonian is involved. Well, what I do know is that David Dale Owen, one of our first state geologists, had a huge museum down in New Harmony. You can see it, it's called the Granary. It's a 3-story building. It was filled with 75,000 artifacts. And before he died, he packed up 14 crates of artifacts and sent them to the Smithsonian. But if you look in their archive today, they have no record of them. Okay? There's also conspiracy theories about there was a race of people that were not Native Americans. We don't know who they were, but they're kind of covered up. Well, in Mammoth Cave, they had what they call a stone box grave inside of Mammoth Cave, and we find those a lot in the Adena type of funerary arrangements here in Indiana, where you have a big mound, and underneath of it, you have some dirt, you have some charcoal, rock layers, then you'll have like a box-cut grave, and they'll have a person there, usually sitting up, which is kind of odd. Well, they had that in Mammoth Cave, and they actually found a mummy. They took pictures of it so that we know it exists. They sent that to the Smithsonian for analysis. Now the Smithsonian doesn't know anything about it. So many people think that you send something to the Smithsonian, it just disappears permanently. Going down the storyline, talk to somebody at the Smithsonian. He says, well, I'll tell you this. We've got huge warehouses, and little old ladies send us hairpins that are antique and things like that every single day of the week. And we've got to catalog everything. He said, we have a backlog, it's like 4 or 5 years of trying to catalog everything. It's a mess. He said, you can actually get a form, fill out, and go look at our collection anytime you want to. But he said, it is a humongous amount of stuff. He said, you can't even fathom what we have here. So I looked at that, and what's happening in the legal realm is the thing called the Repatriation Act of 1990. And what that means is that any tribe, they don't have to prove any lineage. All they have to say is, that's a Native American artifact and we want it. And they can legally take that artifact. So many of the museums are pulling those collections so they can't be claimed. And so I don't know which it is worse. Is it really a conspiracy of Smithsonian, or a museum just worried that their collections are going to be taken? I don't really know the answer.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
I was really interested in that one show that you had, it was supposed to be a tunnel that went under Ohio.
Yes.
The Indians went through and back. Do you think that was really true?
I don't know. I have a bunch of cave friends that I say, what do you think? Because you've been in caves, your entire adult life. They say, well, we don't think that's true, but here's what we do know. the water level was lower before they built the dam and lock system along the Ohio River. They said, so if there was any cave that went out of the Ohio River, it's probably flooded by now. And the one cave that I showed in that same video where Daniel Boone Cave has the waterfall flowing from it, I have 3 friends that went inside that. They actually climbed up to it by a rope. And they said, it gets back there, and you said, you can't go back any further without jumping into the water. So they said, we don't know where that goes. So still intriguing stuff, we don't know. What I would like to do, I'd like to take a picture of this crowd because my wife will never believe me. Tell you the truth, I don't believe it either. Well, all I gotta say is, talking to you tonight, my accent came out just a little bit more. I thank you for that.
So one of the great things about having Roger here, besides all the wonderful stories, which we much appreciate, is that Roger has some amazingly wonderful fans whom we have also gotten to know. And one of those fans, on behalf of all of us at the Lawrence County Museum, one of those fans has made you this wonderful thing. It's adorable.
So you got Abraham Lincoln on it.
Yes,
All
it's
right.
got limestone and Hoosiers and all kinds of very cool stuff.
I gotta have their
So,
name.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
So much for being here. We appreciate it. I think this may be the best crowd that we've had in a very long time.
Well,
And,
appreciate that.
We wish you continued success with your YouTube videos because they're really fun. Open it? Okay, let's open it.
Oh,
What's that? Oh, yeah, that would be a good question. Well, first let's look at the blanket. Did anybody come from Harvard?
oh, check this out.
Isn't this adorable? Look, uh-oh.
And just think, this is all because I decided to make a video instead of a list. This isn't haunted, is it? But
No. We don't mess around with ghosts except one day in October.
Again, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. It's really heartwarming and humbling. Thank you.